Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today we are discussing the state of the game and a potential cause for it that usually I don't see brought up too often at all. So let's get on into it. So the state of the game. What is the state of the game? Well, if you ask the player base, the general answer will be that the state of the game is fairly passive, campy, snipery in top tier games. So like, tier 9 and tier 10 games, it's very passive, exceptionally snipey. In a lot of cases, and it really is true, in a lot of cases, you rarely get within 15 kilometers of the other team. Maybe a destroyer or two may wander, closer than that, but in most cases, you're typically sitting in the back for a massive part of the game. So that is, of course, a very passive, very stale, play style at higher tier. Now, of course, the next question that usually follows that is, why is it like this? Well, there are two main reasons that you'll get from a majority of the player base. And those two main reasons are, everybody's favorite two classes, Submarines and CVs. They'll say that submarines are these invisible death machines that you have no idea where they're at. And suddenly they launch these torpedoes that are nigh undodgeable. They'll delete your ship and go on about their day. And there's little to no counterplay to them. Then they'll go on to the CVs and talk about how, the CVs, they have infinite planes. They can fly their planes across the map in mere seconds and just bully you until you're at the bottom of the ocean. And AA literally does nothing. So those are, again, a very TLDR description of, why those two classes are considered to be, again, the two that are causing the higher tier meta to be very passive and very campy. And of course, the spotting those two provide as well. Almost forgot to mention that because, of course, submarines, they're pretty much nigh undetectable and they can spot you with impunity. And CVs, of course, the planes can just fly around you and spot you on match if they wish to do so. Almost forgot to mention those two things there. But yes, again, that is a gist of why those two classes get blamed so much. But as I was sitting here thinking about this topic, there was a third reason that came to mind that I really don't see brought up too much. I might have seen one or two comments on it a little while ago, but recently here I haven't seen it pop up too much on the channel, and there might be a very good reason for that. But the other reason is that, I don't know if you've paid attention, fellas, but over the years, we've gotten a suspiciously high number of battleships at higher tier that really don't care about the major armor thresholds at tier 10 and tier 9 anymore. We've gotten quite a few ships that don't care about the 32mm threshold anymore. We've got even more ships that don't really care about the 30mm threshold anymore. Now, why there's two thresholds important? Well, you see, the way that overmatch works. Overmatch is a mechanic in-game where if you have a gun that is of a certain size, there is a formula applied to it where it can then overmatch that amount of armor, again, once it goes through the formula, if it's of a certain caliber, right? So for years, the number you wanted to have, and I guess still technically the number you want to have today, is 18.1 inch guns or bigger. Why? Because those 18.1 inch guns, 460mm guns, and bigger, they can overmatch 32mm of armor. Which means that they don't care about the last major armor threshold in game. This is the armor that you can typically find on the bow and the stern of higher tier battleships, 32mm. So ships armed with 18.1 inch 460mm and above caliber guns, they just go straight through 32mm of armor. It doesn't matter how you angle to them, they're going to go right on through it and pin. And for a very long time, the only ship in the game that could do that was the Yamato, the tier 10 Japanese battleship. So for forever, the Yami was, of course, the king of, not caring about armor. However, of course, she paid for it quite dearly in game. Her turrets take 2 calendar years to turn. She's a very slow ship. Her armor, while good at range, is very weak up close, and you had to deal with the very wonky Japanese battleship dispersion. So that was some of the ways that she would be balanced, right? And her, mediocre AA at best. So she paid for it, definitely so. But again, you played it right. It was a really strong ship, and it still is a very strong ship in today's World of Warships. But then we got the Musashi, her sister, that could also overmatch 32 millimeters of armor, but she could do it at tier 9. Granted, of course, you had tier 9 battleship. When she's in tier 9 and tier 10 games, she still needs that 18.1 inch gun to do that. But of course, if she's top tier, she can overmatch plenty of those ships, no problem. And so forth and so on. We got the Incomparable, the Shikishima, and now with super ships, it's feeling like, we're getting a whole lot of super ships that don't care about the 32 millimeter threshold as well. The Hanover, the Satsuma. The Satsuma, of course, has, the old Deadeye built into the funny button, right? Granted, Wargaming seems to have pumped the brakes on this here recently with, the Patri and the Maine coming to mind right now, that, they have a large number of decently sized guns for being super ships, like the Maine having 16-inch guns. Well, yeah, they can overmatch a whole lot. That is still a devastating broadside to have. And then, of course, when you look at the 30 millimeter threshold, the 30 millimeter threshold is a little more crucial to my point, because the 30 millimeter threshold, if you could overmatch 30 millimeters of armor, then in most cases you really don't care about cruiser armor at all. Why? Because a lot of cruisers nowadays, they have 30 millimeter plating somewhere. Even in the days of old, very few cruisers could sit there and, face tank and bow tank enemy battleships, right? Maybe Stalingrad with her, armor scheme, and, maybe Moskva back in the day when angled properly. Sure, they could face tank for a bit, but most cruisers couldn't do that. They would typically try to bait you to shoot their broadsides where they had thick enough belt armor to bounce your shells. And then, of course, as time went on, the 30 millimeter threshold became more important to cruisers because it became a much more common bit of cruiser armor as we went on. But very much like the 18.1 inch and above club, the 457 millimeter and above club has really exploded here in recent years. Again, just going off the top of my head, we've got, the Thunderer, the OG Conqueror that could take the 457 millimeter guns. We have the Ohio, the Vermont, the Kremlin, the Georgia, the Bungo, again, so forth and so on. So these are battleships that really just don't care about cruiser armor at all. And cruisers are very important to, your team's success, because cruisers are meant to be there to, do a couple of things. One, put shells on target, get DPM on the enemy ships. And two, they're meant to back up the destroyers. And destroyers are probably the single most important ship on your team. Because without destroyers, you have no spotting, you have no enemy destroyer screen, you have no torpedo screen, you have no area denial with, your friendly destroyers' torpedoes. And since we've had this quite crazy influx of large caliber battleships at higher tier, cruisers are, of course, a little bit more timid about pushing up. And I can't really blame them, because cruisers are, it's still completely possible nowadays for a cruiser just to get absolutely deleted at the start of the match. I mean, we've all seen that happen. And that's always been the case when we had, kind of tamed calibers on battleships back in the day. But now that we have all these 18-inch, 457 millimeter plus battleships at higher tier, cruisers are, ever more so cautious about pushing up, because there's plenty of cases where they, can't simply push up, because there's a very good chance they'll just get annihilated by that, that Vermont with her 12 457 millimeter guns on the enemy team, and they really can't angle to it. Now, of course, I'm not saying cruisers should just, have always been able to go out in the open and just, bounce battleship caliber guns for days. Of course, back in the day when you eat a full broadside from a battleship, you're going to hurt, if not get outright deleted. But, you always had, the chance to angle or mitigate the damage by trying to get most of the shells to hit your the part of your ship that could bounce those shells when angled. But nowadays it's just kind of like, well, if it's the right ship with a 457mm or above gun on it, I'm just kind of dead, right? So that could be something that is adding on to the state of higher tier games. And of course, you could also flip this the cruiser side and say, well, cruisers, we've got a lot more HE spammy cruisers that, I don't like being on the receiving end of a constant stream of HE or SAP, right, as a battleship player, so I don't want to push up anymore. You could also say destroyers have gotten a little crazy over the past couple of years, right, with certain torpedoes and features that they do have. I mean, what, the La Pampa coming out Wednesday, tomorrow, that's another torpedo vomiter right there, and we're getting quite a few ships in the future that are very torpedo focused. So of course battleship players don't want to eat a wall of torpedoes every 2 seconds, and I'm speaking from Battleship Main's perspective right there. I guess the point I'm trying to make in this video, besides of course just talking about the ever increasing amount of overmatch capabilities that higher tier battleships are constantly getting handed to them nowadays, is that you can't really point the finger at one class and say they're the reason why high tier games are so passive. Every class has gotten a little screwy here in the past couple of years, right, with some absolutely insane ships. Why is that? Well, of course, when a ship comes out and it's kind of crazy and nuts, or has the new gimmick, of course everybody rushes out and either grinds it or buys it, right? And that's what wargaming wants, obviously. So, again, it's not really any one class. It's just, again, the gimmicks sell, right? And then, well, you got to out-gimmick the next gimmick. So then you go from having, the Ohio with 8 457mm guns. Now you have the Vermont with 12 457mm guns, because, yeah, without the Ohio was crazy back in the day, having 8 457mm guns on the Ohio, but then we got the Vermont a little while after that with 12 457mm guns, right? And then you have the main battery reload boosters on the on battleships now. You have ever more HE and SAP span coming out from some cruisers. We're having cruisers now. There's several cruisers in the game now with battleship caliber guns on them, right? The Defense, the Sevastopol, and the Siegfried. So yeah, it's really easy to point the finger at one class and say this class is causing all the problems in the game. I'm not saying submarines and CVs don't have their own problems. I'm just saying that it's not all their fault. It's, a compilation of issues that are causing higher tier games to be so passive nowadays, but no one wants to talk about that. They kind of just want to point the finger at their least favorite class and say, you are the problem, when that's not really it. It's kind of, I guess you could say it's like gimmick creep, where everything's got to have a gimmick, right? The Spanish cruisers, excellent example of this. Their only gimmick was the alternative firing mode, where you could get a couple of quick shots off back to back, and that's not that crazy of a gimmick anymore nowadays. And guess what? No one plays Spanish cruisers really, because I guess they aren't gimmicky enough, right? So that's what I'm trying to say here in this video, guys. It's a multitude of issues, and I do wish Wargamer kind of pumped the brakes with the gimmicks. I say this as we just get the Pan American Battleship line with, of course, their funny button gimmick and all their maneuverability things they got going for them and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, you could have made a line of Atlanticos just fine without the funny button, and it would have been great, in my opinion, because Atlantico is a really fun ship in my mind, and one that still does pretty well in today's World of Warships, but of course that won't sell, right? So guys, that is my 2 cents for today on the state of higher tier games and World of Warships. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I mean, do you think it really is just one or two classes, or do you think it's gimmick creep, or whatever you want to call the situation going on with higher tier tech line and premium ships? So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below about this topic. Hope you guys have a wonderful Tuesday, wonderful rest of your week, and hope to catch you guys in the next one.